Morning, everybody. Great to be here with you all. Let me know if that's too loud. This reading is taken from a college commencement address given by David Foster Wallace a number of years ago. It was later published as a short book entitled This is Water. I've edited it down for brevity for the most part, but the full speech is really worth a read, especially in our time now where it can sometimes feel like us against them, me against the world. There are two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and eventually one of them looks at the other and asks, "What's water?" If you're worried that I plan to present myself as the wise older fish explaining what water is to you, please don't be. I'm not the wise old fish. The point of the fish story is merely that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about, and that our automatic and preconceived assumptions can often be totally wrong and misguided. Here's just one example of the total wrongness of something I tend to be automatically sure of. Everything in my own immediate experience supports my deep belief that I am the absolute center of the universe, the realest, most vivid, and important person in existence. Think about it. There's no experience you've had that you're not the center of. As a result, it's extremely difficult to stay alert and attentive instead of getting hypnotized by the constant monologue inside your own head. Learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to and to choose how you construct meaning from experience. This is the most important question of our entire lives. How to avoid going through our respectable adult lives unconscious, a slave to our heads and to our natural default settings of being completely alone day in and out. By way of example, let's say it's an average day. You get up in the morning, you go to your challenging job, you work hard for 8 to 10 hours. At the end of the day, you're tired, and all you want to do is go home, have a good supper, unwind for an hour, because you have to get up tomorrow and do it all over again. But then you remember there's no food at home. You haven't had time to shop this week because of your challenging job, so now after work you get in your car to go to the supermarket. But it's the end of the day and traffic is very bad, so it takes way longer than it should to get to the store. And when you finally get there, the supermarket's crowded because of course it's the time of day when everybody else with hard jobs goes and shops. And now you have to wander all over this huge, overlit store's confusing aisles to find the stuff you want, maneuvering your junky cart through all these other tired, hurried people with carts. Eventually you get your supper supplies, except now there aren't enough checkout lines open, even though it's the end of day rush, so the checkout line is incredibly long, which is stupid and infuriating. But you can't take your frustration out on the frantic lady working the register, who's overworked at a job whose daily tedium likely surpasses the imagination of many of us here. And many more dreary, annoying, seemingly meaningless routines besides. That's not the point. The point is that this petty, frustrating stuff like this is exactly where the work of choosing comes in. Because the traffic jams and the crowded aisles and the long checkout lines give me time to think. And if I don't make a conscious decision about how to think and what to pay attention to, I'm going to be pissed and miserable every time I have to shop. Because my natural default setting is the certainty that situations like this are really all about me, about my hungriness and my fatigue and my desire to just get home. And it's going to seem like everybody else is just in my way. I can spend time in the end-of-day traffic being disgusted about all the huge lane-blocking SUVs and Hummers burning their wasteful 40-gallon tanks of gas, driven by inconsiderate and aggressive drivers. And I can think how our children's children will despise us for wasting all the future's fuel. And we're probably screwing up the climate, and how modern consumer society just stinks, and so forth and so on. You get the idea. The thing is, of course, there are totally different ways to think about these kinds of situations. In this traffic, all these vehicles stopped and idling in my way. It's not impossible to imagine that some of these people in SUVs have been in horrible auto accidents in the past, and now find driving so terrifying that their therapist has all but ordered them to get a huge, heavy SUV so they can feel safe enough to drive. Or that the Hummer that just cut me off is maybe being driven by a father whose little child is hurt or sick, and he's trying to get this kid to the hospital, and he's in a bigger, more legitimate hurry than I am. It's actually I who am in his way. Again, please don't think that I'm giving you moral advice or saying that you're supposed to think this way, because it's hard. It takes will and effort, and if you're like me, some days you won't be able to or flat out won't want to. But most days, if you're aware enough to give yourself a choice, you can choose to look differently at this lady who just screamed at her kid in the checkout line. Maybe she's not usually like this. Maybe she's been up 3 straight nights holding the hand of a husband who's dying of cancer. Or maybe this very lady is the low-wage clerk at the motor vehicles department who just yesterday helped your spouse resolve some infuriating red tape problem through some small act of bureaucratic kindness. Of course, none of this is likely, but it's also not impossible. It just depends on what you want to consider. If you're automatically sure you know what reality is and you're operating on your default setting, then you, like me, probably won't consider possibilities that aren't annoying and miserable. But if you really learn how to pay attention, then you will know there are other options. It will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, hot, slow, hellish type situation as not only meaningful but sacred, on fire with the same force that made the stars. Love, fellowship, the connected oneness of all things deep down. It has everything to do with simple awareness of what is so real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us all the time, that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water. Thank you.